Somewhere right now, there is a person sitting on a talent the world has never seen, not because they lack the ability, not because the market is too crowded, but because they are waiting for the right moment, waiting for some invisible signal that has not arrived yet, and if they are honest with themselves, has never shown any sign of arriving at all. They are waiting for someone to come for them, to discover them, to hand them the permission slip they've been telling themselves they need before they can begin. Here is the truth that nobody is coming to deliver. That person is not on their way. The talent scout, the perfect moment, the undeniable sign from the universe, none of it is coming. The person coming for you is called nobody. But here's the most dangerous part. The voice in your head telling you to wait. It doesn't sound like fear. It sounds like wisdom. It tells you that you're being strategic, that the people who leap before they are ready are reckless. What if I told you that voice is not protecting you? It's just guarding the dust of your postponed potential. Today, we're telling the story of Bryson, a man who spent years waiting for a moment that was never going to arrive on its own, until one ordinary Thursday evening, he stumbled across a few paragraphs he almost scrolled past. Those words showed him the difference between waiting for your moment and understanding that your moment doesn't exist until you build it yourself. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't about talent. It's about the invisible force standing between you and the thing you were built to make, and what happens the day you finally see it for what it is. If you're ready to stop waiting for the sign, hit subscribe. Let's look at what Bryson found. In a city that moved fast and rewarded the people who moved with it, there lived a 36-year-old man named Bryson who had been almost ready for as long as anyone who knew him could remember. Bryson was, by the assessment of everyone who had ever seen his work, genuinely gifted. Not in the vague, encouraging way that people describe potential to be polite. In the specific way, the kind where people look at what you have made and say things that go beyond compliments, things with detail in them, things that tell you the person speaking actually sees what you did and why it worked. He had the eye. He had the instinct. He had the vision stored in notebooks and folders and the persistent, low-burning heat of a person who knows what they are supposed to be doing with their life and has not yet started doing it. He had a good job, stable, adequately paid, entirely functional. It was not the life he had imagined for himself at 22, but it was a life that worked, and the working of it had become, over the years, its own kind of gravity. He told himself he was being strategic, that he was waiting until he had more savings, more time, more certainty about the exact right direction, more confidence that the thing he was building in his head was ready to become a thing he was building in the world. His friends knew about the plans, had known for years. They had stopped asking. Not unkindly, they had simply learned through a long series of enthusiastic updates that led to the same destination, that the asking tended to produce a familiar answer. Soon, almost, when the timing is right, he knew what they thought even though they never said it. He thought it himself in his most honest moments in the gap between what he told people and what he knew to be true. He was not strategic. He was waiting, and the thing he was waiting for had not shown the slightest sign of arriving. The years had passed the way years pass when you are not watching them closely enough, faster than seems fair, and with less ceremony than they deserve. By 36, Bryson had accumulated 3 years of detailed planning for a brand he had never launched, 2 years of refined sketches for a body of work he had never shown publicly, a folder on his desktop labeled Launch Final that had not been opened in 4 months. A set of skills that people in his industry would have paid to access, sitting quietly in a life built almost entirely around something else. Every year brought a reason to wait a little longer, a demanding period at work that needed to pass first, a financial pressure that needed to ease, a personal situation that needed to settle. He was not inventing these reasons. They were real, they were legitimate, and he met them with the same conscientious attention he brought to everything. But when each one resolved, another appeared seamlessly, as though the universe had a scheduling system specifically designed to keep him one reason away from beginning. He had stopped sharing the project with new people. Not because it had changed, it hadn't, and that was part of the problem, but because there is a specific embarrassment that attaches itself to being the person who has been about to do something for a very long time without doing it. The explanations got harder to deliver convincingly. The gap between the vision in his head and the absence of anything real in the world had widened to a distance that was increasingly difficult to bridge with words. On a Thursday evening in October, Bryson was doing what he often did in the hours between finishing work and going to sleep, moving through the internet with the unfocused energy of a man burning time he could not afford to waste. He had watched 2 videos that had not stayed with him, read the beginning of an article he had not finished. He was somewhere in the middle of a social media feed that was returning nothing of value when something stopped him. It was a few paragraphs from a book, shared by an account he did not follow, placed in front of him by an algorithm that did not know his name or his story or the 3 years sitting in a folder labeled Final. He almost scrolled past it. He didn't. The paragraphs were from something called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. They were about a force Pressfield called resistance, capital R, as though it were a living thing rather than a feeling that rises in direct proportion to the importance of the work you are trying to create. The more meaningful the thing, the stronger the resistance. The bigger the dream, the louder the voice that says, wait, prepare more, do it when you are ready, do it when the conditions are better. Bryson read it once. Then he read it again. Then he sat very still in the blue light of his screen for a long time. Because what he had just read was not a description of a concept he was unfamiliar with. It was a description of the last several years of his life, precise and forensic, and uncomfortably accurate in a way that made his chest tighten. Every delay he had attributed to bad timing. Every postponement he had dressed in the language of strategy. Every reason he had generated to wait just a little longer before beginning. He had not been strategic. He had not been patient. He had been losing a war he had not known he was in to a force that knew him completely, that spoke in his own voice, that sounded so much like wisdom and caution and self-respect that he had never once stopped to ask whether it was telling him the truth. Resistance had been wearing the costume of patience for 3 years, and it had been winning. He bought the book that night, finished it in 2 sittings, and then sat at his kitchen table in the quiet of a Thursday that had just become Friday and felt the full weight of what the last 3 years had actually been. Not waiting for the right moment, being kept from it. He called his oldest friend Marcus the next morning, the one who had known him since before the plans, who had watched the folder labeled Final go unopened through 2 conversations, and said nothing because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. Bryson told him about the excerpt, about resistance, about what he had understood sitting in the blue light of his screen the night before. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that landed with the particular weight of a truth that has been waiting a long time for permission to be spoken. I've watched you prepare for that launch for 3 years, Bryson. Every time I thought you were about to go, something came up, and every time the something made complete sense. I never knew how to tell you that the somethings were the point. Bryson did not say anything. The version of you that launches is not going to feel more ready than the version of you that keeps waiting, Marcus said. It's just going to be the version that decided the waiting was costing more than the risk. He drove home and opened his laptop, pulled up the folder, looked at 3 years of preparation, the plans, the refinements, the careful accumulation of almost readiness, and saw it clearly maybe for the first time. It was not a launch pad, it was a waiting room. And resistance had been the one handing out the numbers, telling him his turn was coming, keeping him seated in the particular comfort of almost while the thing he was built to make sat untouched on the other side of a door he had never tried to open. He had confused preparation with procrastination, and the cruelest part was that resistance had made them feel identical. He called his mentor that evening, an older woman named Celeste who had built 2 creative businesses from nothing and who had always been direct with him in the way that only someone who genuinely believes in your potential can afford to be. He told her about the book, about resistance, about 3 years in a waiting room. Celeste listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Can I ask you something? When you imagine launching, what is the specific thing you are most afraid of?" He thought about it honestly. That it won't be good enough. That people will see it and it won't match what I've been saying I was building. "Right," she said. "And how long have you been making it better to protect yourself from that moment?" The silence that followed was its own answer. "Here is what I know about resistance," Celeste said. "It is not irrational. It is extremely intelligent. It knows exactly which fear to activate to keep you exactly where you are. For some people it's failure. For some it's judgment. For you it has always been the gap between the vision and the execution, the fear that what you make won't match what you imagined. And so it keeps you in the imagining where the vision is still perfect, rather than in the making, where it becomes real but imperfect." She paused. "Bryson, the work in your head is not your work. It is a dream of your work. Your actual work, the thing that will matter, the thing that will reach people, the thing that will become what you always hoped it would be, only exists on the other side of beginning. And beginning means accepting that the first version will not be the final version. It means trusting the process more than the protection." He was quiet for a long time. "So when do I start?" "You already know the answer to that," she said. He did. Bryson did not make an announcement. He did not redesign the brand or rewrite the plan or wait for a Monday or a first of the month or any of the small ceremonies that resistance offers as substitutes for beginning. He just opened the project that night and worked on it for 1 hour. Not a perfect hour. The work was rough and uncertain, and nothing like the polished vision he had been carrying in his head. But it was real. It existed now in a way it had not existed that morning. And that difference, between the thing imagined and the thing begun, turned out to be the most important distance he had ever crossed. He went to bed later than he intended and woke up the next morning thinking about the project before he was fully conscious. That had not happened before. He built a structure around it. Not a grand overhaul of his life. He still had the job, still had all the same constraints he had always used as reasons to wait. But every evening before anything else, 1 hour belonged to the project. Not when he felt inspired, not when the conditions were favorable. Every evening, whether the hour was good or difficult or frustratingly unproductive. He treated it the way Pressfield described the professional treating their work, as a commitment that did not require his emotional participation, only his physical presence. The first week, resistance was loud. The second week, it was still loud, but he was better at recognizing its voice. He had started to notice the specific texture of it, the way it arrived in the form of a sudden urgent task that needed doing before he could start, an email that needed answering, a feeling that tonight was not quite the right night and tomorrow would be more focused. He recognized it now. He sat down anyway. The third week, something shifted. The project that had existed only as a concept began to take on weight, shape. The particular momentum that only comes from actual work rather than the contemplation of work. He was not building what he had imagined. He was building something real which was messier and more uncertain and infinitely more alive. 2 months in, he showed it to someone for the first time. Not to the world. Just to Marcus, who had known him before the plans and had watched 3 years of Almost. Marcus looked at it carefully and said nothing for a moment. Then he looked up. "Why didn't you do this years ago?" Bryson had an honest answer. "I was waiting," he said, "for the right moment." "And what changed?" "I stopped believing it was coming on its own." 6 months after that first evening, the Thursday algorithm, the excerpt, the hour he opened the laptop and began, Bryson launched. Not perfectly, not with everything in place, not with the certainty he had spent 3 years waiting to feel, but genuinely, publicly, with his name on it and his work visible to anyone who wanted to find it. The response was not overnight or overwhelming, but it was real. Real people engaging with real work he had actually made. People who said things with the specific detail that goes beyond politeness. The same quality of response he had always received when he showed his work, except now he was showing it, consistently, to more than one trusted friend in a private conversation. At the 3-month mark, Celeste called him. "I've been watching," she said. "The work is good, Bryson. I want you to hear that from someone who would tell you if it wasn't." He thanked her. "How does it feel?" she asked, being on the other side of it. He thought about the folder labeled final, about 3 years in the waiting room, about the Thursday evening and the algorithm and the few paragraphs he had almost scrolled past. "It feels smaller than I thought it would," he said. "The launching. It felt enormous for years. Now it just feels like work." "Yes," Celeste said. "That's what resistance doesn't tell you. The thing you've been afraid of is not as large as the fear of it. It never is." He called Marcus that evening. "You were right," Bryson said. "The waiting was costing more than the risk." "I know," Marcus said. "I just had to wait for you to figure it out yourself." They both laughed. For the first time in years, it felt like the right kind of waiting was finally over. On a Sunday afternoon 3 months after the launch, Bryson sat at his workbench, a real one now, in the corner of his flat that he had cleared and dedicated to the project, and looked at what he had made. Not the vision, not the perfect, unassailable version that had lived in his head for 3 years, protected from the world's judgment by never being shown to it. The real thing. The actual work, imperfect in the ways that real things are imperfect, better in ways he had not anticipated, alive in a way the imagined version had never been and never could have been. He thought about resistance. He knew now that it had not gone away. It still arrived every evening before he sat down to work, the slight internal friction, the small voice that offered alternatives, the feeling that tonight perhaps was not the night. He recognized it now for what it was, and recognizing it had changed everything, not because it made the feeling disappear, but because it had removed the feeling's power to disguise itself as something else. It was not wisdom. It was not caution. It was not patience or strategy or the reasonable voice of a person who respected the work too much to rush it. It was resistance, and its only job had always been to keep him from doing the thing he was built to do. He had spent 3 years losing to it in a war he had not known he was fighting. He was fighting it now, every evening, 1 hour at a time. Not dramatically, not with fire emojis or public declarations, but with the simple, stubborn, daily act of sitting down and beginning, which was, it turned out, the only thing that had ever been required of him. The right moment had not arrived on a Thursday evening in October. He had made it, in 1 hour, on a night when he almost scrolled past the thing that changed everything. That was the whole story, and it was available to anyone willing to stop waiting for a different one. My friend, Bryson's story is not about creativity or entrepreneurship or the specific fear of launching something into the world. It is about something every person who has ever wanted to build something meaningful will recognize, even if they have never had a name for it. The voice that tells you to wait is not your enemy from the outside. It is not doubt planted by someone else, or circumstance conspiring against you, or timing that genuinely isn't right. It is internal. It knows you completely. It speaks in your own voice, uses your own history, activates your own specific fears with surgical precision. And its entire purpose, its single, relentless, unwavering purpose, is to keep you from doing the thing you were built to do. Pressfield called it resistance. You might call it fear, or perfectionism, or prudence, or simply not being ready yet. The name does not matter. What matters is this. It is not telling you the truth. The right moment is not a moment that arrives. It is a moment that is built out of the decision to begin before you feel completely ready, to work before the conditions are perfect, to put something real into the world before you are certain it is good enough. Because certainty is not something that precedes the work. It is something the work, slowly and stubbornly, builds in you. You will not feel ready. You will not reach a morning when all the conditions align and the fear is gone and the path is clear and resistance has finally stopped speaking. That morning is not coming, but the work is available to you today. In 1 hour, before you feel ready, on a night when you would rather do something easier, That is the whole secret. It is smaller than you thought, and it has been waiting for you to find it for exactly as long as you have been waiting for it. Here is your challenge, the same confrontation Bryson had with himself on a Thursday evening when a few paragraphs stopped him mid-scroll. First, name the thing, not generally, specifically. The project, the brand, the body of work, the thing you have been almost ready to begin for longer than you can comfortably admit. Write it down. Give it a name that is specific enough to be honest. Because resistance thrives in vagueness, in the comfortable distance between "I want to build something" and the concrete, nameable thing you have been protecting from the world by never starting it. Second, identify the reason you are currently waiting. The real one, not the legitimate-sounding explanation, but the fear underneath it. Is it that the work won't match the vision? That people will see it and find it insufficient? That beginning means accepting that the first version will be imperfect. Name that fear specifically, because named fears lose the power that unnamed ones have. You cannot outmaneuver something you have not been willing to look at directly. Third, give it 1 hour tonight. Not a launch, not a plan, not a reorganization of your workspace or a research session or a conversation about the project with someone who will tell you it's a good idea. 1 hour of actual work on the actual thing. Rough, uncertain, nothing like the polished vision. Real. Because the distance between the thing imagined and the thing begun is the most important distance you will ever cross, and it is crossed in exactly 1 hour of sitting down and starting. Nobody is coming for you, not because you are not worth coming for, but because the version of you that the world needs to see cannot be discovered. It can only be built by you tonight. If this story landed somewhere true for you, if you recognized yourself in Bryson's waiting room or his folder labeled final, share it with someone who has been almost ready for too long. Sometimes the most important thing a person can receive is not encouragement to keep going. It is the clear-eyed naming of the thing that has been keeping them still. Leave a like and tell me in the comments, what is the thing you have been almost ready to begin? Name it. Right here, right now in the comments. Because naming it in public, even to strangers, is the first small act of building the moment you have been waiting for. Subscribe for more stories that help you see not just what you want to build, but what has been standing between you and building it. Remember, the person coming for you is called nobody. The moment you have been waiting for is called now. And the only thing standing between you and the work you were built to do is the next hour, and the decision to spend it beginning. Start before you're ready. Work before you're certain. And never mistake the silence of an unlaunched dream for the wisdom of a person who is not yet ready, because resistance sounds exactly like wisdom, and it has been lying to you for years.